buy a Ford Bronco since the year 1996, but now it is finally returned. This is one of the hottest automotive reveals of 2021, and I've got one here. This is a 2021 Ford Bronco Outer Banks. There are a bunch of different trim levels to choose from, but I've got the Outer Banks here. We're going to be testing a bunch of different versions of the Bronco here in this video, but I'm first going to give you an exterior walk around. So the car that you see here is finished in Rapid Red, which I think is a really pretty color here on the Bronco. I love how it has the big Bronco written across the front instead of just a Ford badge or even a Bronco badge. We've got the circular headlights harkening back to this car's heritage. Now, the Outer Banks is not a particularly crazy off-road trim. As you can see, we do have all-terrain tires here, but they're not the big chunky ones. You can get a Sasquatch package that is going to put 17-inch wheels with 35-inch tires on this vehicle, but as you can see, we have more of a road-friendly setup that I think is going to be more comfortable for people that just want to drive this car every day. Now, Ford says you can get a whole bunch of different equipment on this. You can get a winch on the front. You can see we do have our tow hooks here, and the ground clearances are really good on all of these models, but they are going to differ slightly depending on whether you get the 4-door or the 2-door model and whether or not you get that Sasquatch package. We're going to talk more about that when we get it out on the road. As I mentioned, this is the 4-door model. So as you can see, it's much longer this way than the 2-door model, which competes with the 2-door Jeep Wrangler. I think most people are going to order this one just because it's going to have a lot more space for all of your kids and stuff like that, more space in the trunk as well. Now, we do have the hardtop plastic roof. I believe you can get one that's painted as well, and you can get a soft top as well. I think this is the first one that's going to be available on the Bronco when it first ships, which is why that's what ours has. And of course, just like a Jeep Wrangler, that roof and those doors are removable. You can take it all off for an open top, open door experience, which is pretty cool. Now, let's move alongside the back, where just like a Jeep Wrangler, we've got our spare tire there right hanging off the back, and we do have a side opening tailgate. You're going to pull it here and the swingy is going to open like so. The strut doesn't seem super duper strong, but it does extend really far out, as you can see, past the point of the actual bumper, which is kind of interesting. And then again, just like a Jeep Wrangler, at least on this hardtop model, you're going to just lift up that piece of glass, opening up to the trunk. And I think the trunk is pretty big. It's pretty comparable to a Wrangler. You can see my bags fitted there. And this is actually big enough that if you take the doors off, they will fit back here, the roof as well. You can carry all of the panels with you if you buy this 4-door model, which is a nice little party trick should you want to have the open top experience, but put everything back on in case it rains. Now let's check out the interior of this Outer Banks trim level. We've got our keypad here on the door. I always loved those from Ford. Pillarless doors, which is kind of interesting. You don't have a big pillar here. Now, we do have these really nice leather seats. I find them to be pretty comfortable, maybe even a little bit more comfortable than a Wrangler here. You can see they have this sort of brown and black finish. The only thing I don't love about them is that they have this blue stitching, which I don't think really matches much else on this interior, but we do have the Bronco stitched in there, which is quite cool. Now let's go ahead and hop in. You can see we have our little cargo net right here, and the mirrors are going to be mounted on the fenders, not on the doors, so that's great. When you take those off, you'll still actually have mirrors. We've got push button start, so let's go ahead and hit that. We're going to fire up the car here, turn off the radio. We've got this nice Bronco logo as we fire it up. Let's go ahead and make sure that is off. You can see we have the larger of the two available screens here, a 12-incher. This is similar to what you're going to get on a F-150. It does have navigation. Of course, it has wireless CarPlay and Android Auto, which is really nice as well. This is a very nice big screen, bigger than anything you're going to be able to get in a Wrangler. Of course, you've got plenty of physical keys below it for your climate control heated seats. We do have a 360-degree camera on this model, which is really nice. That could come in handy for off-roading as well. Below it, we have our little tray right here, which is a wireless charger on this model. We've got our grab handle, which is pretty much the only other blue thing in this cabin. I think this would have maybe gone better with a blue interior. We've got Bronco written across here. Some of the materials aren't necessarily super expensive feeling, but again, this is a built tough off-road vehicle built to withstand off-roading. It's not a luxury vehicle. Over here, we have our controller for our 10-speed automatic transmission. A manual transmission is available as well. I'm going to try and show you that as well. We've got our 2 cup holders. All of our window controls are down here, of course, because the doors come off, including our mirror controls and our 4x4 controller right here with our GOAT modes. So we have 2-wheel high, 4-wheel low. There are 2 different kinds of all-wheel drive systems available here. We have the base unit that doesn't have the automatic 4-wheel drive where it'll alternate between rear wheel and 4-wheel drive, but we do have the GOAT modes, which if you turn are going to change the different drive modes. We have normal, we have eco, we have sport, there's a bunch of off-road modes, slippery, mud and ruts, sand, and then I think there's a rock crawl mode if you get one of the other trim levels. We don't have that mode here on this Outer Banks trim. As you can see, we're viewing these drive modes through a very digital screen here. Your tachometer is going to show up there numerically, which is kind of weird. You see it says 0.6, and we also have a digital speedometer, digital gas gauge, and then we have a physical tachometer over there. It's a nice looking display. I don't know if it matches necessarily the rest of the aesthetic, but it's not bad at all. And of course, the steering wheel is pretty nice as well. We do have some nice safety features here with our Ford Co-Pilot system. We do have adaptive cruise control and lane keep assist here in the front. And let's go ahead and talk about some Bronco specific features here. We have this really cool mount right here that mounts right into the dashboard. This is a phone mount, but you can also get a GoPro mount, which is really cool. We have our diff lockers up here. That's going to be really fun for off-roading. We even have some USB ports up here so you can plug some stuff in, like if you have your GoPro or phone recording video up here. We have the hard top roof. As I mentioned, you can see that it has this sort of felt to make it a little bit more sound insulation. It's still not super duper quiet out on the road. It's about the same as a Jeep Wrangler, and taking this off isn't too tricky. You just have some triggers back here. You have another one of them up here, and then you have a little latch right there, and this will come right off. You can take off these front 2 panels pretty easily. The rear, I'm assuming, is a little bit more difficult to do. And now that we've checked out the front seats, let's go ahead and check out the rear seats. As I mentioned, we have the full 4-door model, which is what I think most people are going to get. I personally would get the 3-door just because I think it looks cooler. But if you do opt for this 4-door model, you are going to get an extra seat back here. You're limited to only 4 passengers in the 2-door model. This 4-door model, you can fit 5 people, although not super comfortably. We have our little armrest right here, and I'm about to show you the legroom accommodation here. So you sit down, and you can see they've kind of cut this seat in such a way that you get a little bit more knee room, but it's not crazy. It's not great. You can fit your kids back here in a pinch, but if you want something a little bit more practical, Ford has SUVs like the Explorer and Edge for you. And I will say that they have done a nice job of incorporating some USB ports, AC outlets, and our window controls down there. So it's not too bad. And you can fold these seats down. Just drop the headrest like this, pull this tab, and as you can see, the seats do fold fairly flat. Now it's time for the moment you've all been waiting for. We are getting the Ford Bronco out on the road, and I'm still driving my Outer Banks trim level without the 35-inch Sasquatch package because I think that this is a trim that a lot of people are going to buy and really enjoy if you're not going to off-road this vehicle all the time. This is a very good road setup. It has the really nice interior, but it's not going to be uncomfortable with the knobby tires and all of that. So how does it drive on the road compared to its key competitor, the Wrangler? I'd say extremely well, and I think there are 2 key reasons for that. Number 1 is the steering. Now, the steering in a Wrangler is very vague, very sloppy, really all over the place. You don't get a great sense of what the front end is doing, but in this, and we were on a very windy road up here, the Bronco feels very confidence-inspiring. It doesn't feel like it's rolling around all the time. It also has independent front suspension, whereas the Wrangler has a solid axle up there. So when you go over a big bump, the front end rides over it quite nicely. The rear end still jumps up quite a bit. That's because it is still a solid axle, but I think the overall ride comfort in here is good enough for most people. It's not a cushy ride by any stretch, but it's not completely firm and overwhelming. In terms of road noise, the hardtop that we have here is decently sound deadened. When you get it up to highway speeds, you're definitely going to notice a lot of wind, but again, the same can be said of a Jeep Wrangler, so it's really not too much in it between them in terms of that. The one area where I do think that the Wrangler does still edge out this Bronco is with the transmissions. So let's talk about the engine and transmission combinations a little bit. The base engine is a 2.3 liter 4-cylinder EcoBoost with 270 horsepower and 310 pound-feet of torque. That's a little less than you're going to get from a V6 Wrangler in terms of power, but significantly more torque, which is nice. Now the base transmission is a 6-speed manual with a crawler gear, so it's technically a 7th gear. We're going to try that out tomorrow when we do some off-roading, but most people are going to get this car with the transmission we have, a 10-speed automatic. Now we also have the optional engine here. It's a 2.7 liter, so only a little bit bigger, but you get 2 extra cylinders. It's a V6 with 2 turbochargers instead of just 1. Now on this, the power goes from 270 to 310 horsepower, and the torque goes from 310 to a really nice and meaty 400 pound-feet. Now that comes in handy when you're going to pass people. Let's put it down. Oh yes, this thing has really good torque, really good grunt. It never struggles to get up to speed the way that you would in like a base V6 Wrangler. It is quite a powerhouse. Now the one complaint that I do have about this drivetrain, I love the engine, it's super powerful, super torquey. The 10-speed automatic transmission though, not quite as smooth as the 8-speed ZF that Jeep uses. I noticed a couple times when we were climbing on hills that it would do a sort of awkward downshift or upshift depending on what I was doing. Not quite as smooth as the 8-speed that Jeep uses, but again, not a deal breaker. I would say in terms of the on-road performance, I think that this, the Bronco, is the more comfortable of the two for road driving. All right, so we're starting off some slow speed off-roading. We're in a Bronco Wild Track. This one's got the 2.7 liter V6 engine. Now we've locked the rear diff. We've got front and rear lockers on this vehicle. We've also got the Sasquatch package, which is sort of like a cheat code off-road because these 35-inch tires are just so big. You can just get over this terrain super easily. I don't even have the front diff locked, just the rear one engaged, and we are making it through this stuff really easily. We had some really rocky terrain there. We're about to go through some mud. I'm gonna make sure I give it plenty of power to get through that mud really easily. I love the fact that the suspension is very compliant. We were able to take a ride with Lauren Healy, famous off-roader, and you know, he showed us some of the high-speed capability of this Bronco. Is absolutely crazy. This will keep up with the Jeeps. As I mentioned, we've got the Dana 44 rear axle in the back. We've got a different Dana front axle, you know, the independent one, and it seems to be doing its job really well here. Really good wheel articulation. We have plenty of cool off-road toys as well. We've got these camera systems showing me what's in front of me. It makes it really easy to do a trail like this. Of course, I've got my front and rear lockers right up here, super easy to get to. You don't have to fumble with anything down low. It's right up here, really easy to grab. You've got your trail turn, which is like this really cool tank turn where it'll break the inside wheel and it'll just help you turn tighter on trails like this if you ever get somewhere too tight. The goat modes are great. We're in the mud and ruts mode right now, which locks the rear diff automatically. You know, it just gives me so much good traction. I've got this really cool gauge right in front of me right now. It's showing me my tire pressures, wheel articulation, front end angle, all of that stuff right here in my gauge cluster if you need it, which is great. You can see a lot of people are accidentally honking their horns here, including myself. But yeah, this is absolutely the off-roader that I hoped it would be. I'm really hoping that I get a chance to take this out to my familiar roads out in Ocala, Florida, so I can really put it to the test that we put it through with all of our other vehicles. That's more of like a high-speed type stuff because Florida just doesn't have this sort of elevation. I'm glad I'm getting to test it on this type of terrain as well, though. It's just amazing what these Broncos are being able to put through, whether or not you get the Sasquatch package or whether or not you get one of the more off-roady trims like the Wild Track or the Badlands. The only thing that I don't have, we're driving the Wild Track as a reminder, over the Badlands is that sway bar disconnect, which is helpful if you need a lot more wheel articulation. It'll drop those wheels down down and just give that to you on those really articulated pieces. But other than that, I really love this Wild Track. They kind of sell it as more of like a high-speed off-road type style vehicle, sort of like a Jeep Mojave if you wanted to really compare it to something, although this doesn't really compare to any Wrangler models that they sell right now. And again, if you want the best off-road performance, you want to go for the two-door. It's going to be tighter on the trails. I drove a four-door on the trail. It was a little big. This two-door definitely feels smaller. I do like the fact that the two-door is a little more nimble in situations like this, and you're definitely going to have better angles, approach, departure, things like that. So off-roaders, you know what to do. Get the two-door one. All right, so we've driven the new Bronco out on the road and found out how great it is. But again, Ford built this vehicle for off-roading, so let's dive into some of the important off-roading specs that you need to know on this vehicle. You're gonna get 8.4 inches of ground clearance, that's the minimum. It's gonna go up to 11.6 inches with the Sasquatch package. The Sasquatch package is hilarious. The reason why it's called Sasquatch is because Sasquatches have big feet, that's why it's called Bigfoot. You get massive 35-inch tires with 17-inch forged wheels, so 11.6 inches of ground clearance, which is more than you're gonna get in any Wrangler. Gives you amazing numbers, so the approach angle goes from 35.5 inches on a two-door Bronco to 43.2, a little bit worse if you get the four-door. The departure angle is 29.7 inches, 37 inches with the Sasquatch package. The breakover is 21.1 inches, 29 if you get the Sasquatch package, and you do get up to 33.5 inches of water fording no matter which one you go for, which is really impressive in a vehicle like this. So now let's sum up my final verdict on the Bronco. I'm so happy that Ford decided to bring back this nameplate. It's so iconic. It's been enough years since that incident, you know which one I'm talking about, has happened, that I think now was the perfect time to bring back the Bronco. It's been years since Jeep has had any real competition against the Wrangler, but the Bronco finally brings it. You've got the removable roof, the removable doors, a two-door, a four-door, a manual, two different engine options, massive 35-inch tires, and the best thing about it all is that it's actually nice to drive on the street. That independent front suspension, that steering makes this worlds better than the Wrangler to drive on the road and off-road. This will do all of the things the Jeep does. The only thing that maybe is not the best about it, it is quite wide, whereas the Wrangler is quite a bit narrower. I do like the transmission in the Jeep just a little bit better, and as of right now there will probably be more aftermarket options on the Jeep, but trust me, as you see with this one here, look at that winch kit, the roof rack, everything. The aftermarket is gonna go nuts on these, and I think you are gonna start to see Broncos on off-road trails near you. This vehicle is fantastic, and I'm so happy it's back.